and Tavshin Pei Daled, the first Parsha class of the new year. So we will be beginning in Perek Lamed Beis Pasuk Tesvav, chapter 32, verse 15. Now, before this verse, the Torah is talking about the blessings and the wealth that Hashem will shower upon the Jewish people when they enter the land of Israel. But the unfortunate result that may come from that is what we begin reading now, again, chapter 32, verse 15. Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivat. Yeshurun, referring to the Jewish people, became fat and kicked and rebelled. Shamanta Avisa Kasisa. You have become fat, dense, coarse. Vayitosh Eloika Asahu Vayinabel Tzur Yeshuasai. And it, referring to Yeshua and the Jewish people, forsook Hashem who made them, and they spurned, they rejected the rock of their support. So this is already the first, this pasuk is the beginning of the description of how the Jewish people, because of their wealth, become corrupt, become fat in the senses, they become corrupt and very mundane. And what that leads them to is rejecting Hashem and to begin worshiping idols and pagan gods. Our focus is going to be on the fact that the Jewish people are called here Yeshurun. And what I'm going to say tonight is based on a class from Rabbi Yisrael Reisman, Shlita from Brooklyn, New York, and with my additions to it. Okay, so here we have the Jewish people being called Yeshurun. This is the first time in the Torah the Jewish people are called Yeshurun. They're typically called Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. Here is the first time that they are called Yeshurun. In next week's Parsha, Parsha V'zayis Bracha, the Jewish people will be called Yeshurun twice. But in this week's Parsha, it has it once, which is in this verse, and this is the first time of the Torah that we have the Jewish people being called by this name. So first of all, what is the meaning of this name Yeshurun? And the truth is, we mention this every morning. In the davening, we say, hold on one second, we just get a sitter. That from your love that you loved him, referring to Yaakov, and the joy that you rejoiced in him, Karasa Eshema Yisrael Vishurun. You called him Yisrael, which we know from the Chumash, right? In Parshas Vayishlach, that after the fight with Esav's angel, his name is changed to Yisrael. And here is also mentioned that his name was changed to Yeshurun. But the first time we'll ever find actually in the Torah that the Jewish people call Yeshurun is here in this week's Parsha. So again, what is the meaning of the name Yeshurun? That's number one. And number two, why is it only appearing, why here, why now at this point of the Torah is the Torah decided to call the Jewish people Yeshurun? Why here are they being called Yeshurun? Okay, so the first thing that we need to explain so let's first talk about what does the name Yeshurun mean. And if you look in the name Yeshurun, you find the word Yashar, which means straight, upright. And actually, the Ramban, Nachmanides, points this out. Nachmanides is writing in Parshas V'eschanan, which is in the book of Devarim, Perek Beis, chapter 2, Pasuk Yud, verse 10. And there the Ramban is talking about the fact that the Torah sometimes will change a person's names, a people's names. In that context, the Ramban argues. The Ramban says that when the Torah mentions the Chori and the Chivi, that they are the same people. There's a nation discussed in Parshas V'eschanan called the Chori. There's a nation called the Chivi, and the Ramban says they're the same. They're really the Chori. Why are they called Chivi? Because he gives a reason why they're called Chivi. Chivi is related to the word, a serpent. But we're not going to get into that right now. What's the point? But that's there where he's discussing how you could have the same people and they have a name, and sometimes the Torah changes the name. Why did the Torah change the name? Because there are times where the Torah wants to be able, through the name, to depict a certain idea, a certain concept, a certain meaning. And then the Ramban says that we also find that this is done, that the names will be changed lishvach, for a positive purpose, for a praiseworthy purpose. And the example he gives is Yaakov, right? Our forefather Yaakov. What is the name? What does the word Yaakov mean? Kadi, what does Yaakov mean? So, yeah, heel, right? That's it. The Torah says that Yitzchak called him Yaakov because his hand was grabbing hold to the heel, because Yaakov was grabbing hold to the heel of Esav. But we also find that Esav said, you know why Yaakov's name is Yaakov? Vayakveni zeh pamayim, because he tricked me twice. The word Yaakov can also come from the root aleph kuvav, which can mean to be deceitful, to cheat, which is how Esav, when he was angry at Yaakov, upset with Yaakov, he called him Yaakov because of Vayakveni, he tricked me. So the name Yaakov could also connote trickery. Says the Ramban, so sometimes, but you have the name Yaakov, which is an expression, which is a word of trickery, of deceitfulness. The Yikru Isa Yeshurun. And then there will be times that the Torah will now, instead of using the Yaakov name, which depicts deceitfulness, rather it'll now then call the Jewish people Yeshurun. Why? Mintam v'yashar. Depicted from here, Yeshurun comes from the words tam, wholesome v'yashar, and upright and straight. So there are times where the Torah is going to want to call Yaakov, or the Jewish people, Yeshurun, because it's, instead of using the name Yaakov, which may have a negative connotation, we go to the positive connotation of Yeshurun from the word yashar, upright and straight. So what we see from the Ramban is that the name Yeshurun that the Jewish people have, which is another name for Yaakov, is the name that depicts upright, being straight. What does it mean to be upright, to be straight? So for that, we have to take a look back in Parshas Re'eh, Perek Yud Beis, Pasuk Chavches, chapter 12, verse 28, where the Torah says like this: Shmar v'shamata es kol ha'devarim ha'eleh. Guard and listen to all these words, asher neichem etzavcha, that I command you, l'man yitav lach ulevanecha acharecha ad olam, so that it shall be good for you and your children after you forever. Ki sa'aseh ha'toy v'hayashar beinei Hashem Elokecha, when you will do that which is good and straight, upright in the eyes of Hashem your God. So here we find the Torah using the word yashar. You should do, the pasuk says, when you will do what is good and upright in the eyes of Hashem, then you will then you will then Hashem will do good for you. So Rashi in his commentary says, when it says you shall do the good, what is good referring to? The good referred to is be'enei hashemayim, to do what's good in the eyes of heaven. V'hayashar, and you shall do that which is upright, means be'enei adam, do what is upright in the eyes of people. What does that mean, upright, doing what's right or upright in the eyes of people? So the commentary on Rashi of Sivsei Chachamim explains be'enei adam, uprightness in the eyes of people, pirish, going dina de bar metzra. For instance, what is an example of what is in the eyes of people upright? For instance, the laws of bar metzra. What's the law of bar metzra? Listen to this law. Listen to this halacha. If you own a field, say I own a field, and that field that I own is right next to your field. It's right next to your field, and I want to sell that field. You know who gets the first right to buy that field if I'm planning on selling it? You, because you abut that property, and since you abut that property, I want to sell it. From my point, it makes a difference who I sell it to. So once I'm selling it, the right thing to do is to offer it to you, so that instead of you, if you want to buy another piece of land, you need to go who knows where to buy another piece of land. You have a piece of land right next to yours. That is the law of bar metzra. And when the Torah says, do what is upright in the eyes of people, says the Sivus HaChachamim, this is an example. The whole idea behind this, that the first rights of refusal are to the neighbor of that land, is only because of this idea of doing what is upright and good. Meaning that according to what we would call the letter of the law, there would be no reason I have to do that. You have no rights to that land. It's not like you own it. I'm not cheating you out of anything. It's my piece of land. I have a right to do my piece of land whatever I want. But the right thing to do, as we would say, is to offer it to your neighbor first. You have nothing to lose. He has all what to gain. So the Torah says, offer to him first. That's what the Torah means. You shall do that which is upright in the eyes of people. Upright means that you're going so far out of that you're not just treating people according to what's rightfully theirs or what's rightfully theirs. You're going to go beyond that, and you're going to do what's upright by them, what they consider is the proper thing, which we would call it the menschliche thing to do, the decent thing to do. You have nothing to lose, and he has what to gain. You offer to him first. So that's what yasha means. Upright means that you are treating someone in a way that even though one can argue that it's not according to that, essentially, it's not, this is the law. This halacha bar mitzvah, offering it to first, is the law. But the basis of it is not so much because he has some kind of right. The basis of it is because people see that. People feel that this is the right thing to do. This is the decent thing to do. And that's what you do. So the name Yeshurun comes from Yashar, and from Rashi we see that Yashar, upright, means to do things in the eyes of people that is upright, to do things, to treat people in a way that it's the right thing to do. It's the decent thing to do. Okay, now we have a meaning, now we understand what does the name Yeshurun mean. You know, the name Yisrael comes from the word sar, officer or struggle. As Yisrael's name was. Yisrael means to struggle. It also means to be a sar, to be an officer, to be someone that's prestigious. And Yeshurun comes from the word yashar, to be upright, as we just explained. So now we have an understanding of the meaning of this name. All right, but now we have to understand, why now? Why now did the Torah decide to use the word Yeshurun in this context? So there's really 2 points, I think, here that have to be brought out. Number one, the Jewish people are being called Yeshurun once they're in the land of Israel. When the Torah talks about how they become fat and become corrupt and become mundane and therefore they become idle and therefore they abandon Hashem, that's when they're in Eretz Yisrael. So Yeshurun, that name Yeshurun, is first being used for the Jewish people when they're in Eretz Yisrael. What would be the connection between Eretz Yisrael and Yashar and upright? So I was thinking, that if the whole idea of upright means that our interaction is done in a way that is decent and menschlich, as we say, so that really becomes relevant in the land of Israel. When people were in Israel and they were settled in their lands and settled in their lives and trying to make a living, these are the situations where we start we interact with people, and where this whole idea of yashar, being upright and being menschlich, really becomes relevant. In the desert, not to say they weren't interaction between people, but, in many ways, there wasn't much going on in the desert. And we find, and again, there may be some sources that say, it says that before the Torah was given, there was machlekes, arguments amongst the Jewish people. But any time in the Torah that we find the Jewish people sinning, it's against God. It's not against each other, as far as I recall. But once the Jewish people get into the land of Israel and they're living on their property and they have to make a living and they're doing business and they're living their regular lives, that is where the situations of yashar, of being upright in the eyes of people, of being decent and doing the right things in the eyes of people, becomes very relevant. So using the name Yeshurun, once the Jewish people come to the land of Israel, is really meant to tell the Jewish people, this is the standard that you have to live by. This is the kind of people that you have to live. This is the kind of people you need to be. Your identity as the Jewish people needs to be Yeshurun. You're upright. That not only are you serving Hashem, but the point is also that you are upright. You treat each other with menschlichkeit. You treat each other in an upright way, in a way that is decent and good to each other. That is the identity of what you that's the identity that you carry. And that starts in Eretz Yisrael. So when they're in Eretz Yisrael, that is the name Yeshurun. And it's an identity. It's meant to really challenge them, to tell them, this is what you need to live up to. This is the kind of people you're meant to be. People that are yashar, that are upright in the eyes of people, as we explained. Okay, so that could be an explanation as to why the name Yeshurun is used for the Jewish people once they are in the land of Eretz Yisrael. But what's also interesting is that we're using the name Yeshurun in the context of the Jewish people being rebellious. That's the whole point. Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivat. Yeshurun became fat. Yeshurun became corrupt from all the wealth, and they became very mundane and very involved in physical gratification. And because of that, they rebel against Hashem. Why then use the name Yeshurun, which means upright by people? So perhaps here we can say that the point that Shai is trying to say is that if you think about people that are upright, people that are menschlich, and they go out of their way to be good to people and to do what's right by people, these are people that are typically not very selfish. You know, if you're going to go so far to treat someone this way, that means you're a decent person and you're not a selfish person. Nonetheless, when the Jewish people become wealthy, the wealth will corrupt them no matter how decent they may be. No matter what kind of decent people they may be, wealth has the power to corrupt. It's really a lesson in saying that no matter how selfless you may be, once wealth comes in, not to say that wealth is going to for sure make that happen to you, but the point is that wealth has that potential. That's the danger of wealth. It can corrupt a person. Even a selfless person, a selfless people, that they carry the name Yeshurun, that means that they were embodying this idea. If once they become wealthy, even they can fall into the traps of wealth and rebel against Hashem. So perhaps that's why in this context of rebelliousness, the name Yeshurun was used. Okay, so now let me continue our discussion with a very interesting Gemara in Maseches Yoma. So we know that one of the garments that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, wore was called the Choshen. We call it the breastplate. And in the breastplate, there were 12 stones. And on the stones, there were names engraved. You had the names of the 12 tribes engraved. And the Gemara Yoma is discussing there how whenever there was a question that had to be asked, and they were going to ask what's called the Urim and Tumim, they would let's say the leader of the Jewish people would stand before the Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol would wear the breastplate. In the breastplate was called the Urim and Tumim, which were special names of Hashem. And then what would happen is that, you know, according to one opinion at least, where the question would be posed, and the answer would basically come out of the letters. The letters that give the answer would light up. And that is how the answer from heaven was received. So the Gemara's problem is like this. You know, if you look at the 12 tribes of the Jewish people, there's a letter missing. You know, you want to get the whole aleph base, right? You need the whole aleph base to be able to communicate all the messages. So if you have the names of the tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes, you still got a letter missing. Or you have 2 letters missing. But one letter missing is the letter Tzadik. There's no Tzadik in any of the names of the 12 tribes. So where does it come from? Says the Gemara. You know what else? You know what else is written on those stones? The names Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Those names are also written on the stones. Oh, so where's your Tzadi? In Yitzchak. Great. But the Gemara says we're still missing a letter. We're still missing the letter Tes. So where does that come from? Says the Gemara that, you know what else was inscribed on those stones? 2 words. Shivtei Yeshurun. The tribes of Yeshurun. Or in English, very often the word Yeshurun is Jeshurun. But those 2 words, Shivtei Yeshurun, the tribes of Yeshurun. And there you have your test in the word Shivtei. Okay, now, we're just going to focus on right now that the Medrash says that on which stone were the words Shiftei Yeshurun inscribed, on whose stone? So the Gemara, the Medrash says, and this is actually brought down in Rambam, in Maimonides in the laws of the vessels of the Beis Hamikdash, the Rambam says that below Binyamin's stone, below his name, this is where, and this is what the Medrash says, you'd have the words Shiftei Yeshurun. Okay, so every stone has a name. I don't remember where the Gemara says where Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov's names were written. I don't remember where the Gemara says what the Gemara says what it says where they were written. If the Gemara says that, or I don't remember actually. Oh, so the Rambam says, right? You have Ruvain stone. That's the first of the tribes. So above Ruvain is Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and then below Binyamin would be the words. Shift, meaning you had the 12 stones. Each stone had a name. On the first stone, Ruvain, also it said Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov above Ruvain, above the name Ruvain, and then below the name Binyamin, on that stone that had Binyamin's name on it, you had below that Shiftei Yeshurun. Okay, you get that? That's the setup. Now, the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud says that actually it didn't say Shiftei Yeshurun, but it said Shiftei Yisrael. Instead of the word the tribes of Yeshurun, it said the tribes of Israel. Rambam, Maimonides, as I mentioned to you before, when he goes through this whole setup, he actually says that it said by Binyamin, it said Shiftei Ka, the tribes of Hashem. Shiftei Yud-Hey. The whole point is you need the word, the main point is you need the word Shiftei because you need a test. But according to the Gemara, according to the Talmud Bavli, Babylonian Talmud, it said Shiftei Yeshurun. The Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud it says Shiftei Yisrael. And the Rambam said Shiftei Ka. So the obvious question is, what the commentaries ask on Maimonides is, why did Maimonides basically, ignore what the Gemara says? The Gemara says Shiftei Yeshurun. And at least the Yerushalmi says Shiftei Yisrael. So I'm going to share with you a very interesting explanation that Rabbi Reisman brings down from the Chassam Sefer. And it doesn't explain everything, but it's an explanation as to why why Rambam at least didn't use what the Gemara says, Shiftei Yeshurun. And for that, the Chassam Sefer wants to say like this. The Chassam Sefer says that by the generation of the desert, and by the first Beis Hamikdash, that is where it said Shiftei Yeshurun. The word, when it says the tribes of, that's when it says Shiftei Yeshurun. Because since Yeshurun means to be upright, the Jewish people deserved that name Yeshurun during the times of the Mishkan, the first Beis Hamikdash. The name Yeshurun could be there was appropriate because of the fact that the Jewish people were acting upright. But by the second Beis Hamikdash, we know, the Gemara tells us, why was the second Beis Hamikdash destroyed? Because of the sin of sinas chinam, unwarranted hatred amongst each other. Well, if they had hatred amongst each other, then uprightness was not happening, or uprightness wasn't going to happen in a situation where there's sinas chinam, where people are disliking each other. You're not going to have the uprightness, either because they're not going to practice being upright, or if they're practice being upright, it's not for real. So therefore, says the Chassam Sefer, that when the Talmud Bavli says that it said Shiftei Yeshurun, that's when the Jewish people deserved that name, when they were being yeshur, being upright. But once by the second Beis Hamikdash, they already were having a problem with sinas chinam, with hatred amongst each other. Therefore, they were not being yashar, they're not being upright, and therefore the name on the stone cannot continue being Yeshurun. It had to change over to something else, either as Yerushalmi says Yisrael, or as the Rambam says Shiftei Ka. Now, the question is, all right, so what happened? How did the name? According to the Chassam Sefer, the name changed, right? The name changed. How did it change? It was a magic? It was a miracle? It went from Yeshurun to Yisrael? Is that what happened? Perhaps. But Rabbi Reisman brings down, and I'm not sure this comes from the Chassam Sefer or it comes from this is his idea, but there is a very famous story that's brought down in the Yerushalmi, Talmud Yerushalmi. It's a similar Gemara in Kedushin, but I'm not sure if it's the same version. But the version in Yerushalmi is that one of the stones of the choshen of the breastplate were missing. At a certain point of time, and this would be during the second Beis Hamikdash, one of the stones was missing. The stone missing was the stone of Binyamin. That stone that had Binyamin's name and also Shiftei Yeshurun, it was lost. They had to go find a new stone. And they found out that there was a man who wasn't even Jewish named Dama ben Asina, and he owned that stone. And they went to him and they asked him that they'll buy the stone off him. Well, the problem was the stone, for some reason, his father used to keep the stone, it must have been a very precious stone, under his pillow, and he was sleeping. And he wouldn't wake up his father to take out the stone. Famous story, right? They first thought that he was just, playing hardball with them, and then it came out that he was doing it because he didn't wake up his father. Okay, now, so Rabbi Reisman says, or that's the way he brings it down, like, how do you lose a stone from the Choshen? How do you do that? The Choshen doesn't go anywhere. It's worn by the Kohen Gadol. It says in the Beis Hamikdash. How does it get lost? And why that one of all of them? Why, is it just an accident? That's the one that was missing? So the answer is that that's the stone that said Shiftei Yeshurun. And at that point of time, they were not worthy anymore of that stone with that name. So it fell out, and it got lost. Meaning clearly what happened is it fell out and it got lost. Seems a bit hard for that to happen. I mean, where could it have fallen already? It fallen and gotten lost. But the point is, though, that no, it was lost. Hashem made it get lost because they were no more worthy of the name Yeshurun. And therefore they needed a new stone. And it was on the new stone that they understood, they knew that now they had to write Shiftei Yisrael or Shiftei Ka. That is a very, very interesting approach to all of this. Okay, so what comes out is that the name Yeshurun is a name, according to this idea, that we have to be deserving of. If we are Yashar, if we treat each other Yashar, upright, decent, menschlich, then we deserve the name. Otherwise, we don't. Now, here is where the connection to Yom Kippur comes. When we daven on Yom Kippur, and we end, and in the Shemona Esrei, we end the middle blessing of the Shemona Esrei on Yom Kippur, we say like this: Ki ata salcha Yisrael, for you forgive the Jewish people, u'mechalan l'shiftei Yeshurun, and you pardon the tribes of Yeshurun. We're using the name Yeshurun on Yom Kippur. We're referring to the Jewish people as Yeshurun on Yom Kippur. That means to say that the way that we atone, the way we get atonement from Hashem is when we carry the name Yeshurun. If we carry the name Yeshurun, the name of being upright, of being decent to one another, and that's what we live by, that is the merit that we will be forgiven by Hashem on Yom Kippur. Hashem forgives Shiftei Yeshurun, the tribes of Yeshurun. If we will live up to the name Yeshurun, that is when we will be able to merit the forgiveness of Hashem that we so much seek on Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur is very important to know, is a time of rachmim, tremendous mercy from Hashem. And using the word Yeshurun in the blessing shows us that the key to be able to merit that mercy is by being Yeshurun, being upright and being menschlich and being decent to one another. That's the key. And that's what we have to strive for as Yom Kippur is approaching, to work on being Yashar. And if we're being Yashar, we certainly are going to do things that are more than Yashar. Clearly, we have to make sure not to cheat and not to hurt people. That's beyond Yashar. But the idea of using the name Yeshurun on Yom Kippur that we do every time in every blessing of Yom Kippur is to stress that we need to be Yashar. We need to come to the point of being Yashar. We treat each other with Yashrus, with uprightness, with decency, with being good, what's good in the eyes of people, what people feel is decent, and being good to one another. If that is how we live, that is how we will merit the forgiveness of Yom Kippur. Wishing you all a Gemar Chasim Teva.